Oh, well, with that, we can hop into our official topic of the day, which is change. And it's interesting, even that little pre-conversation tells me that, sometimes how to make changes at your church. Sometimes you don't know you're making changes at your church, and you're just doing what you're doing. And for new leaders, or when you're first in a church, man, you have to spend a lot of energy and time learning to begin to value what people at the church value. Because I can imagine, like, even let me find out what songs you guys know. Oh, those are terrible songs. They're old, or they're stupid, or we're not doing that.
Mm.
Excuse me, you arrogant pig. And that's usually my thought. So I'm calling myself the arrogant pig. It's easy to like write stuff off without really understanding where people are at. And it's like, oh gosh, it's embarrassing for me to do Mighty to Save every other week if that was like, if that's where they were. And I'm thinking, like, that's an old song. Or if I'm old and they're used to the new stuff and all I want to do is Mighty to Save, like, it's so anyway, so when you dive into a new church, you have to take time to begin to understand what they value. And my from not doing this right, advice is, the first year you're on staff at a new place, don't make many changes. It's going to be different just because somebody else is doing it. Even if you do the same set that they've been doing with lame songs or with different songs or whatever, it's going to be different because you're different, but anyway, so as a conversation starter, I want to talk about the formula for change. So the formula for change, I can't remember who created this idea, but it's a formula, and it's D plus V plus F greater than R. You're like, what? Okay. It basically says, so R is resistance, because there's always resistance to change, right? Anywhere we go, anything we're doing, there's an old guard, there's there's apathy, there's just this is how we do it, this is our comfort, this is where we are. There's always going to be resistance to change, always, always, always. And unless the things on the other side of the equation are greater than that resistance, change is unlikely. Maybe it's not impossible, but it's unlikely. So those three things that are such an important part of making changes: dissatisfaction, vision, and first steps. So I'll unpack each of those a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk about it. So dissatisfaction is actually a resource that we have to use at our disposal, because everybody has a little bit of that somewhere. Even if it's like comfortable, or like we know it, or like we don't want to change, there's something about it that's like, yeah, that does bug me a tiny bit. And if you can get people more in touch with that dissatisfaction, with their own dissatisfaction, that's beginning to be something on that side of the equation, which is what you need. So sometimes, for instance, if you're dissatisfied with not having enough players from your church on your team, and you're always either A, bringing in people from the outside, or B, covering with tracks, there's never enough of a sense of like, man, I wish we had drums or a piano player, or like, I wish we had, like, you're covering that up. And so as a leader, if I want to make a change and get more people involved, help people say, hey, look, I need to be involved here, I might intentionally make it feel not as good, because I'm trying to create dissatisfaction so there's enough energy to change, right? So that's how the dissatisfaction works. Vision is simply, and you have to paint a clear picture of what it will look like, and what it will when things are different, right? When things are different, it'll look like this. People say with vision, people say, you know, I can't really picture it any other way. That's a vision statement. I can't see it. I can't imagine it looking differently than it looks today. So you have to begin to, with your mouth, with your words, with your actions, with giving people experiences, it has to feel, you have to be able to see some vision. What could this be like? If we do this change, what could it be like, right? If we order those hymnals and we have hymnals again, what could it be like? No, I'm just kidding. Unless you want to, and that's fine. And then the next thing is so important, and then that's where vision usually falls down, because it has no place to go. There are no first steps. So, you know, if we're going to name a change, what's a change that you want to make in a church, and what
within the team, like within how we're leading our teams, or
anything? Yeah, just an example of a change.
For me, is I would like to add in using the click in our ears.
Okay. Okay, that's a great one, because I was looking at the Facebook, one of the worship leader groups on Facebook yesterday, and there was 2 or 3 comments about questions about how do I do that? How do I implement clicks? Like, we don't want loops, we just want clicks. How do we do that? So super important. If you don't, you have to have a plan, because it's going to be a train wreck if you don't, and you have to prepare for it to be a train wreck. But what's a first step that you can do? Well, you know, because maybe you don't even have ears at the church, right? Which makes it impossible to do it during a service, but you can rehearse with it. Hey, we're going to put a click. I have this app, you know, whatever, that is going to help us to get on these clicks. What's the first thing I'm going to do? What's the second thing I'm going to do? What's the third thing I'm going to do? How am I going to give relief to the team? How am I going to make it really clear and explain to the team how it works? Like, so many worship leaders want to do clicks because it's really good for your band, but they just start, and they didn't give really clear, here's how it's going to go. And by the way, here's how it's going to feel. The first time, half of the band's going to feel like this is the worst idea you've ever had, and that click is my enemy. It is Satan incarnate, right? Like, giving a really clear set of steps. I mean, it could be things like, here's our plan. If we get off click, this is what we're going to do. This is how to stop the click and continue with the song, because the click isn't the point. The click is supposed to help us get to the point. And if the click is killing us and we have to stop it, this is what we're going to do. You know, like, there's all kinds of clarity, and we can talk about more specifically about how to do that for your church. So dissatisfaction, you know how some songs just don't feel good? That's a dissatisfaction. Some songs just don't feel right. They don't feel right as a song. They don't feel right in comparison to what we've heard on the radio when they do that song. It just, I can't sing it the same way. That's because our tempos are off. And it's because we're not playing together, because we're not listening to each other. Because what happens when we don't have a click is that the drummer listens to maybe the worship leader's guitar or piano or voice, and then the keyboard player is listening to the drummer, or the bass player is listening to the guitar. Like, everybody's listening to different people in terms of getting the tempo. And when you have a click that is like a definitive, nobody's questioning where this is, everybody has to listen to that and follow that. And so if I can tap into my team's dissatisfaction of when it doesn't feel right, when it doesn't sound good, when we don't feel like there's any energy in this song, it's partly because our tempos are off and we're not playing together. And the click is going to solve both of those problems, right? So I can begin to tap into areas where they're already dissatisfied. And then I can give some vision for every seasoned musician. I don't want to use the word as professional, or, you know, like, because most worship team people aren't professional music. They've been playing for a long time, but they're just not. They haven't. And seasoned isn't the best word for this by any means, but every seasoned musician has learned to identify the pulse in music and play around that pulse. It's one of the core competencies, I think, of really confident and competent and accomplished musicians. And so I would like us to grow just a little bit in that area to be more comfortable with creating this music that we're creating. And part of that is having this internalized sense of pulse that we share among the team. We want to have an internalized sense of common pulse with the team. And the only way to really get there well is to have a click, because that's going to give us this. First, it's going to be externalized. We're going to hear it in our ears. We're going to hear this steady tempo, clicking, clicking, clicking. But it's going to establish inside of us a sense of pulse. Because what happens is I approach the music, and I'm not necessarily reading music a lot of the times. I'm just playing the chords and singing the song. And I don't have any of that sense of pulse internally. I just have the chords and whatever strumming pattern I happen to choose. Well, that's a mess. That's cacophony. That's a bunch of different cats just running around the barn looking for a mouse. Like, that was a weird analogy, but I was like, because what's the right thing? Like, cats in a cage. I just saw this video of a mouse trap that was just, forget it. I'm too distracted to even go there. Anyway, so squirrel, mouse. So, but it's a mess. It's a mess when we're all like following our own thing, and there's no wonder that we don't feel like we're together sometimes, because we're not. And that click is going to give us that sense of like, oh yes, we're gonna submit ourselves to the discipline of staying with a single click, a single common pulse. But it's going to make our music come alive, because it'll be in a good tempo. We'll be forced to listen better to everything that's happening and make a single thing instead of just everybody making their own deal, and hopefully it kind of sticks together halfway, right? So first steps for the next 3 months, we're gonna experiment with playing click on one song at rehearsal, not in a service. At rehearsal, we're going to use click for one song or two songs. I'm going to start, it's going to take us a while to get used to this. A year from now, my goal is to have us playing with a click for every song, and us feeling really comfortable with that. But that's a long way away. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to play click on one song and only at rehearsal for 3 months. Right? It's a very clear first step. It's doable. It's going to be hard for some of you. It's going to be weird for us as a team, but it's going to begin to develop something really good inside of us. So don't worry. We're not like starting with all clicks tomorrow, and then the next day we're going to start with loops. Like that's not where we're going. I want to be really clear with how we're getting to where we're going to go. Anyway, so there's going to be resistance. So the smart leader also is thinking about, what is the resistance? Well, I don't want to be a seasoned musician. I just love playing in church. And so I have a really low bar. I'm not going to say I have a really low bar. I just love to worship. Right? I just love to worship. So how can I address that mentality? If I just love to worship implies I just want to be sloppy, or I just want it to be low key. I don't want any pressure, because if you put pressure on me, then the worship goes out the window. So if that's one of my resistances, how can I combat that? How can I diffuse that resistance? What is it? How can I, what are you believing about worship, about the nature of worship, about the way God structures things that makes me think that because it's worship, that means that it can be lazy or easy? I think about Malachi, where for worship they were bringing the leftovers, like the crooked-legged lamb, the lame goats, things that weren't valuable anyway, but they needed to bring something because it was worship. So they brought this lame sheep, and God was like, oh no, you didn't. Right? Like that was not okay. So like, what is it about my understanding? So I might not want to get better. And so why is that a problem? We need to address that, as I need to address that as a leader. How can I equip you and educate your mind to think about why it's important to get better? Matthew 25 talks about the talents, and the master came back, and the guys who didn't double their talents got in trouble with the guy that just hid it in the sand because he was afraid. Like, we can't be that kind of people. We're not that kind of people. So address those concerns. Address the concern that we're going to try to become the big mega church, because the big mega churches are the ones that have these. We're going to become a show. We're going to become a concert. We're not a concert. We're a small little country church. Like, don't make us into a concert. It's like, no, we're musicians. Let me begin to talk about our identity as musicians, and what was that like in the scripture, and we can talk about all the protocols and training that David had for his people, and but help them understand, okay, what is it? Or let's see, what other, it's going to take all the fun out of it. It's not going to be fun to be all like serious, and clicks sounds like things we were supposed to avoid, right? Don't get into clicks. And it's with a C, not a Q. So this is different. But address that. Address every. Start thinking through, why do my people hate this idea, or why might they hate this idea? And what's the belief system behind that hatred or that feeling? And how can I shape that? How can I help them at least to own it and say, you know what? I hate the idea of being so disciplined because I'm lazy. And I'm just giving back to God, in the little time that I have, and I don't have time to not be lazy with what I do for church. That's a really good confession, because I think anybody that would say that would start to feel like that's probably not a good way to think about it, right? So you might not convince them, but you can at least help them address their own resistance, and there's stuff that you don't even know, and you won't know until you say, hey, listen, why do you think that adding clicks is a terrible idea? What is it about that you think is terrible for our church? Not like, generically at any church, but for us, for our team, why do you think that's a terrible idea? Because that might be when, who knows what's going to come out, and they're going to give you the reasons.
Dave, one thing that I recall getting pushback about with clicks is people would, I think they sort of latched on this because I didn't have a good answer for them, and maybe we can come up with a better answer than I had. People said, it distracts me from worshiping because I'm thinking about doing it right instead of just worshiping. And so I just said to them, in time, you won't even realize it's there. You'll be on it. But that didn't seem to be a suitable answer to them. What better answer could I have given them when they said, this is a distraction and it takes my mind away from what I'm doing to focus on a specific of how I'm doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. Like, so when you started playing piano, could you worship, or did you have to focus really hard on learning where that C, E, and G chords were, or the keys or notes for the C chord? Right? Like when we start playing, it's always like my energy is like, okay, get this, and you feel like you can't worship because you're just like focused. You're focused. This is simply adding a new dimension to your playing. It's like learning a new chord shape. It's like learning a new pattern. It's like learning a new scale. It's like, it's going to take some energy from you. And yeah, you know what? You're going to be distracted for a bit. You're right. but I don't believe that we get to be stagnant as musicians. So after this period of like focusing and development, it's going to feel like playing those chords do now. Second nature, not hard. But yeah, but you're right. You're going to be distracted for a while until you get comfortable with it, until you learn it. That's why we're starting so slow. That's why we're not like, because part of the reason why earlier I said one song only at rehearsals for 3 months is that for that one song, you're like, I'm locked in, stay on the click, I'm trying, man. Oh man, this is so hard. And then the other three or four or five songs, you're just playing. You can just, but you know what? That the more we start adding clicks to different songs, the songs that don't have the clicks, you're going to be like, can we add it to this song too? Because it just doesn't feel right anymore. Like it's, you know, if the team isn't really great in terms of their musicianship, you'll really start feeling that, because it's gonna clean up a lot of your bad habits, is what's going to happen. I don't know, Jim, do you want to speak to that question?
I mean, well, you gave the best overall answer, because the most professional thing I can say is once you get to a certain point, if you hear the click, that means you're off the click.
All right.
And that's the reality of playing with the click. Like, once, it should just sound like another person playing that you're locking in with. If you hear it like going against what you're doing, you're off. It's not a distraction in a bad way at that point. It's, oh, I'm not playing right. I think the other thing that I would ask, though, is why it's very situational. So, like, what is it about you wanting to implement a click? Like, why do you want to do that? Because that would influence the direction I would take my answer. I would try to tailor it to. So, in an example would be if we're a mess because we change tempos 4 or 5 times in a song, and I'm like drastic, I don't mean like a couple of BPM, then I would argue to somebody, it's very distracting in worship to not know how to follow the song as part of the congregation. So does it matter that 100 people get distracted because we can't play the song together, or one person has to focus a little harder because they've never played with a click? Like, does that make sense? That kind of, but I don't know your situation. So that's just one example of like talking about how, if you just want to play with a click because you want to play with toys that you got, that you can't, like, if you get all these loops and things and your team isn't used to that, like, it's more of a personal reason. Not Kevin. I know Kevin's not that way. I just mean, it depends on the situation to how much I'd want to, like, where I would steer the conversation. Why am I implementing a click? Because that would be the most important part of the conversation. Why are we doing this?
Do you want to speak to that semi-generically, Mindy?
Yeah, it is for tempo. I mean,
okay.
We struggle with it all the time, and we struggle getting the song started. You know, now I have started having my drummer, you know, on the fast upbeat songs where he can get it, he can count it off, click it off, so that we do have our right tempo starting. But throughout the song, it's just, you know, fast, slow. And I think they would say congregation probably doesn't even realize it. So why is it a big deal? Mm-hmm. You know, I realize it during or even listening back, because now it's streamed. So I watch every service and listen to it back, and I hear it. But yeah, it's just mostly staying on the tempo, and it's constantly arguing over what the tempo is. Even we look at the CCLI sheet and I'll go, okay, whatever this song is, whatever. And invariably, like almost every time, someone says, well, I don't think though they really do it that tempo. And I'll say, okay, let's bring it up. So we that's what I just started doing. We bring it up, and I have the drummer figure it out. I go, okay, what is that tempo? And like every time he's like, oh, it's what it says. It's like, so I've kind of, you know, worked to overcome them wanting to set their own tempo. But yeah, it's just getting started and then staying on track in the songs. I just think
And
we're like settling to just be kind of, we're getting by. And, and that's not me. I'm like always striving to do more and become better and do things with excellence and not perfection. We're not gonna be perfect. And I tell them that, but, I don't think we should just become, just kind of mediocre and just getting by. We're good. It's good enough,
I mean,
That's
I
not the
think
mentality.
I think it's really important for us to say to our teams on somewhat of a regular basis, we don't, as worship musicians, we don't get to slack. We don't get to coast. We don't get to just mail it in. We don't get to just do the bare minimum, because that is the antithesis of worship. That's the antonym of worship, is just mail it in, just get by. No, you can be a musician and have your bar band and suck. That's fine. You can do whatever you want to. We are worship musicians. We don't get that privilege of slacking. Like and like you're saying, we're not mean and we're not perfectionists. No, we just don't get that. That's not part of our rights, is to slack. We have to keep learning and pushing and growing. And I would also argue that, and sorry, I'll let you talk in a second, Jim. I would also argue that the congregation will never say, yeah, that song felt like it was, about 10 BPM too slow or too fast. Like, but you know what they will do? When somebody, I think it was probably you, Jim, said, they're used to listening to the songs on the recordings, from Spotify, from their radio, wherever. They're used to listening, and they feel a certain way at a certain tempo. And when you change that tempo, you feel it. It's different. And so there's a familiarity that you're going to miss by not having it at the tempo like that. But there's also an energy, and they're not going to know why, but they're just going to be more locked in because it's going to feel right, and they won't say that. And so I don't believe the congregation doesn't know. They're just maybe used to it not feeling very good, and it's going to feel better to them. And they might not ever tell you, wow, music really feels better now, but they'll probably sing more. They'll be a little bit more engaged. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we were trying to do Who You Say I Am. And that's a tough tempo song. It's in 6/8, I believe. And it was just, oh my goodness. And we've done the song before several times, but that, for some reason, that particular practice, like and you're right, it just did not feel right. I mean, it was just, and I ditched the song for that Sunday. I go, we are not getting this together. So we're changing it, because I mean, we worked on it. And yeah, it's just, some songs are harder than others, I think, with tempo. But
Yeah.
It's kind of a sidebar to the conversation, but sometimes tempo and rhythm are too kind of like mischaracterized. Like, sometimes the tempo isn't the problem. It's because you pointed out Who You Say I Am, and it's the rhythm that's the problem. So you can play a song 10 BPM slower, 10 BPM faster, or dead on. But if you don't know the rhythm of the song, like how to kind of personify the rhythm to somebody, like, hey, it feels like this, or do you hear the important accents of like where, how the song moves? If you look at a 6/8 song like that, the guitar players they're playing in 6/8, but they're not playing the hard, like, divided beats that the drummer would be playing. Because the lead, like, it's not really a lead line, but that little melodic thing that plays, like, it goes against the beat. Yeah, it's an eighth. It sits differently.
mhm.
And so something like that, like if you're having trouble lining that up, like, and I'm not saying that the tempo is not important, but they're kind of like misdiagnosing. Like, it's not necessarily it's too slow or too fast. It's, do we actually know how this goes? Like, do we know how the rhythms line up together? Because if we don't, if a perfect example is if somebody has a melody line that starts on an offbeat and they don't realize that, they'll slowly adjust to the downbeat. Like, they're like, oh no, I'm coming in late. And then they don't realize that it actually starts on the offbeat. And so you have like kind of those collapsing
Yeah.
things that, you know, they just fall in on each other. But that's kind of a sidebar, different conversation. Probably.
Well, no,
That's
different
probably
though.
what's happening.
It probably isn't a totally different conversation.
Yeah,
Well,
because
wait. Well, go ahead. I have a little thing for the tempo thing, but
yeah,
go
okay.
ahead.
So George Yellick calls it the I think I'm getting this right, the root accent pattern. You know, like there's this repeating accent, like Jim was saying. There's a not all the beats are created equal or are stressed equally. So there's a if you get that wrong, you know, if your piano player's just playing, you know, I don't know, like what would mess it up?
On that song, if you played straight eights, it would drive me nuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 4. Even if you had the accent on 1 and 4, it would drive me nuts.
Yeah. Or even if it's just like or if there's not any, like, you know, because the 6/8 has that, you know, 1 2 3 4 5, so, you know, there's the main accents in it kind of written into that, and if somebody's not playing that or feeling that, then it doesn't really matter, you know. Yeah, tempo is not your problem. So, but on the tempo thing, what were you gonna say, Jim?
I'm so stuck on this now because I think this is huge, but
it is
the idea of working with tempo is, and again, every situation is so unique that it's hard to just put like here's a good prescription for it, moving on. There are instances where I'll work with a group where some people really get the idea of the importance of the tempo, like how it has to stay uniform, and like there are certain scenarios where it may be appropriate to say, hey, this week the drummer, not in the service, but like for rehearsal tonight, I'm gonna have the drummer keep a click in his ear. And now that might mean that the drummer does know how to work with a click, or at least is embracing the idea. If the drummer is against the click, then I would say this won't work. But something like that, where it's like, we're gonna follow him. So if we feel like he's going too fast or going too slow, it's us. So can we just do this song where we stay with Chris, the drummer? You know, I don't know the scenario, but or vice versa, piano player, something like whoever is like, or the bassist, drummer or bassist would be ideal, but someone who's like committed to they're like, no. And if multiple people are, if the drummer and the bassist want to do it, great. You know, but where they're like, they're going to be hearing the same thing. So they're in charge of the tempo. I mean, they're in charge of the tempo kind of anyway, but you know, they're in charge of the tempo right now. So we're going to follow them and stick with them. And if we feel like we're having trouble keeping up, then we're the ones, you know, who are kind of having that issue of going back and forth. And that's difficult because, you know, I'll work with groups like that where singers don't want to use click, or they don't, you know, and it's hard to line that up, but it starts to kind of expose the problem. We could say like, do you see how, like, you know, Chris and whoever my bass player is, like, they've got it, they're locked in. Yeah. And then somebody else, like in a couple weeks, goes, I'll take the click. Like, I'd like to know what they're listening to, because, you know, and like slowly but surely you can build into that, because it's possible to not have everybody use it. Again, every scenario is unique. It's not ideal to have not everybody use it, but it is possible to have like a chunk of the rhythm section of the band. If they're following, then at least your tempo will stay locked. And then if the singers just never get used to it, that's up to, you know, do you know what I mean? Like, it's because we are where we are, we're working with volunteers who we're growing. You know, we don't hold them to that standard of like, well, if you can't follow the click, I'm kicking you out. Like, you know, we'll hire somebody new, because that's not how it works. So I think that there's a balance of like, can I implement the click in some way that's effective? Like, I use click only at my services when we run loops, and the singers don't have the click because the singers prefer wedges, and that's fine. Like, it's not a frequent enough issue that I'm worried about it. But my drummer and my bass player, they lock onto a click like it's nobody's. And I'm used to playing with a click, so whenever I have a loop, I obviously keep the click in my ear too. But you know, the two of them are like pros, so I know that if I run a track, they'll lock into it and they'll be fine, and then I don't have to worry about it getting off. But it's not even a conversation I have with the vocalists, because they like the wedges, they do it. That was like, it's fine. We don't use it enough to justify, you know, going through all of that. Maybe use it once every other week.
But what about in like parts of the song then when the drums and the bass drop out because you're getting to a softer, dynamics are changing and then nobody else has it in their ears, and that's where we usually get off track is when we get softer you get slower usually. And so would you just recommend the vocal, like me as the leader, maybe have it in the
Well, I would
whoever's
always,
leading that song?
the leader should definitely have it. Whoever the leader is, even if they're not part of that, like if you're the one who wants to implement the click, then you should have the click in your ear.
Okay.
For sure. Now I lead from an instrument, so if I'm playing acoustic guitar, I can keep people together. If I'm playing piano, I can set that pace. And so that would be one example. But again, this isn't an ideal solution. So that might be a great example of a moment to expose where it doesn't, say like, look, we all need to be listening to the same thing, because when we were playing together, we were locked in. And then when it's up to us to keep the tempo going, we lose it. So that kind of helps that. Other things you could, in a practice setting, you could have the drummer keep time, just so you could hear like how you might have a tendency to slow down, like even if it's just counting eights on a ride cymbal or something. In a rehearsal setting, you're just saying like, do you see like the tempo doesn't stop? Like even though we've gotten slower or the dynamic has come down, we have a tendency to slow down, but it doesn't, the song's not slowing down. The song shouldn't slow down. So, these are tools to work towards, an ideal goal. It's not, I would never say run with that on a Sunday. Like, yeah, just give it to one person and, because then you've got one person who's now out of time too, because he's listening to a click that's away from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. And I would say, it reminded me of the way I use click when because I've gotten to play with lots of different bands, that like new people. Like I go into a church and first time I played with this team, so I don't know where they're at, and they need different things from me. But when I'm leading, there's a lot of my energy until the band gets really good at it. There's a lot of my energy gets taken up by keeping the band on the click. Like I'm the one who's singing with more emphasis to keep us there, or playing, certain, no, stay with, I'm this like internally, I'm like, no, stay slow. Maybe I'll give the look, like stay with the tempo, buddy. Come on, but that's something I take on me. And there's a lot of energy that I have to use to keep us together, because I'm like, are you even hearing what's the click right now? Because you're not playing with it. I keep hearing you go, like I'm like the drummer. I'm like, there's a certain drummer I have in mind in a certain scenario that was just like, it can't be in your head, And then of course it's like, hey, can you hear? Well, not really great. That's a problem. Like it's got to be throbbing in your face until you're used to it, until you're good at playing with it. It's got to be ridiculously prominent in my head, in everybody's ears. It's got to be uncomfortably loud. Like I don't know what verb, and that's at least that's the way I talk about it until you really have internalized it and you're playing on it and you've developed better habits. Then it's got to be obnoxiously loud in the mix. Am I wrong?
No, I mean I pan my click, so my click and my guide are in one ear, designate, and my music is in the other ear.
Okay.
So, but not everybody likes that. That doesn't, and again, it depends on, scenarios are so unique to
Right.
what works best. But no, I have my click. My click and my loop are in my right ear, and my guide, and everything else is in my left ear. Partially because I'll sometimes take this ear out or put it back in, which is a big no-no. You shouldn't ever do that. Don't do as I say, not as I do.
You can take it out as long as you don't turn up the volume when you do, because that's where the problem is.
Oh well, I don't adjust I don't like anything loud, so which is weird. I don't like anything when it's loud. But anyway, yeah, I keep a clean ear for just click and loop, which might be hard for some people, but that's how I learned.
So are you guys already doing ears?
Well, we are. However, that's the other thing I kind of wanted to bring up is like once COVID hit and we went to like just streaming, and then, you know, people weren't in the auditorium, in the, you know, the sanctuary, and, you know, it's just, you know, I started getting, you know, kickback on it, saying, we don't need to wear them now. There's like nobody in the, you know, the church, and I can hear just fine. And so now it's like some do and some don't. And I have tried and tried to say, guys, you know, we purchased we were all in agreement. They were all excited to get them, and we got them, and they were great at first. And now all of a sudden, you know, I've got some that don't want to use them. And yeah, I mean, I get sick of telling them, please put your ears in. You cannot hear each other from the house speakers that are in front of us. I mean, there's no way. And they still just refuse to wear them.
That's contributing to being off too, because they're listening to a time delayed, you know, that's their reference. So
yeah.
And that might introducing click might clean that up. Well, you have to now, because otherwise you can't get a click.
Right.
I don't know.
I guess I just got to be like a drill sergeant and just say.
Well, no, okay, hold on. Let's circle back. Circle back.
Seriously, like I don't know what to do.
Apply the formula for change, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they dissatisfied with? I mean, is it that the ears aren't comfortable? Do they not have the right size sleeve? Are they cheap? Do they sound bad? Do they not know how to make a good mix? Like, what do they hate about the ears? Tap into the dissatisfaction and try to solve that by this change, by having them wear it, you know?
Okay.
Like, are you able to, I don't know if you're able to do, if you're able to pan stuff, you know, but you can make it sound really great in your head, in your ears. Like, and let me show you, or let me, you know, have Tony come in and let me teach you how to mix your ears, because nobody ever does that. People get ears and there's no training. Or did Rick put them in for you guys?
No.
Or who? Do you guys do it yourselves?
Yeah.
Okay. So somebody come in and help you know how to get a great sounding mix, because there's nothing worse than bad ears, a bad mix in your ears. You know, and then again, you know, what is it that, why are you resisting? Why do you hate wearing your in-ears? You know, do you feel separate from the congregation that's not there? You know, do you have a mic in the room that you can feed into the ears? You know, do you have a room mic? Like, what is it? What is it? Why do you hate it so much?
I did get that feedback, that they felt like they were kind of like in their own thing, and congregation was out here. And we did try to mic the congregation, but it didn't seem like it really did much. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Again, everything is so situational. It's my catchphrase in the morning.
That's what I was going to say.
But one of the things I like to try to, it's kind of Dave's change formula, but I guess I say it in a different way, is I don't ever change anything unless I have unless I have a very clear, explainable reason. And so like sitting with something of saying like, okay, I know this is the way that it's been done, or X, Y, and Z, but I need this to happen because I need this result. And so like here, like kind of bringing all that together. So like, so that idea of like the in-ear system is, I need us to get comfortable with in-ears because we have to start implementing some other things. So now my entire dilemma, my mix-up is, what do we have to do to make the in-ears feel comfortable? Is there an understanding of like, is it the literal stuff, or is it an understanding of what in-ears are for? Because there's a lot of misconception, like in-ears to me and my career and professional work has never been, I want to get a good, like I should be able to put these in and like recline and listen to the service in my in-ears. And I think the misconception is, oh, instead of having to hear everything like this, we'll put it into headphones and it'll sound just like I plugged into my phone or Spotify or whatever. And to me, that's never, my understanding has never been what in-ears are for. In-ears are to remove stage volume, and they give you all the guide and reference that you would get, but into your ear. So if you're the piano player and you love hearing the piano, and when you plug into the guy's in-ear mix and it's like, no wonder you don't like this, you know, it's a full blast of, you know, what, you know, it's all keys and I can't hear any vocalists or anything else and like all that stuff. And so like or they don't understand that idea of like, so like start with everything out, zero everything. And then go through the instrument, be like, all right, what do we need? All right, you hear the acoustic guitar, we can bring a little bit of acoustic up. Great. A little bit. Because if it's too loud, you'd know because there's nothing else playing. You know, and then bring in the, you know, go around the line of what you need. And you should have like a pretty reference mix. You shouldn't have a beautiful mix of like a CD or a concert. You know what I mean? And I think that that's, some people know that, but don't understand how quickly that gets tangled, like how messy that can be. And so, because if you add bass and all of a sudden you can't hear the acoustic, you just turn the acoustic up. And then and now you have too loud of an acoustic. Then you add keys and the bass got too quiet. So you bring bass up and now you can't hear the acoustic. So then you just end up with everything at 9 and you can't hear anything. Or you end up with your instrument at 9 and everything else is low. And so that idea, I think people go for this really pristine, mastered CD quality mix. CD, nobody uses CDs anymore. What am I talking about?
I do.
You can tell that I'm older than like the newer people, but still. No, but the idea, I don't, if I plug my in-ears in and it sounds like, man, I can hear everything, then something's wrong. Like, I'm like, that's too much. I have too much in there. I only have like a little bit of drum because the drums are right behind me. I hear them anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm there. I have click, I have guide, I have the vocalists for harmonies and stuff like that. And you know, I can hear my acoustic guitar because I wear an ear out. So it's right there in front of my body. And then a good bit of bass because the bass is not plugged into, you know, he's direct. There's no amp. So I want to hear the bass as much as I can for that kind of thing. But it's not, if you plug that in, you'd be like, man, this doesn't sound like the song at all. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like it should sound like the song out there, you know, not in here. But that's my background with it. That doesn't mean you can't have a really nice mix. I just think people over mix, they try too hard to fill their in-ears. And it's only this big of a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a tiny speaker. It's the same reason people are like, you know, iPhone headphones stink. Well, yeah, because it's not the same as having like a car system. So you have to you have less real estate to work with about how much sound can come out clearly.
They did come in and get us set, but really, I think, like you said, Jim, you know, things get changed and adjusted and turned up and up and up and really not a lot of training with the sound person, you know, even on how to mix them well. And so
does the sound person make the adjustments, or does each person?
No, the sound person does. We have wireless systems.
Okay. Wow.
That's even, I don't want to say even worse, but it's another level of difficulty, and no insult to your sound engineer. That just means have the process is that much longer. Instead of being able to go and dial something in, now you have to go through everyone one at a time and process that. So it's not undoable. It's a mountain of more effort.
You don't have a digital board, or you don't have it?
I do.
Can you not control things on your phones?
Yes, they could.
Oh, they could. So people could do their own mix.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't.
So maybe I'll recommend that if they want to do their own. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll remind them of that.
I would start. Sorry, Dave. I would start with there has to be like a clean slate. So there has to be like hey, I know everyone or a lot of people have had issues with this. So today we're going to spend the first half an hour zeroing everything out for everyone, unless you're super happy with your in-ears. Like there might be one or two people who's like, I know how to work this. I've done this. It's fine. You know, but if the majority of people have that dissatisfaction, like I would start everybody from the same place as opposed to just tell them now that like, hey, if you want to change it, you can. You know what I mean? I would have some formal recognition of we're resetting this so that you can contribute to your own, you know, you can have a little more agency, but we're also going to tell you why it might be important to try to shape certain things and then move on from there.
And I don't know if that is their issue. I don't really know what their issue is, just other than we don't need to because, you know, it's a small building and it's, you know, small room and I can hear everybody fine. And
yeah.
Something else that might be worth noting, I think Dave touched on it with that idea of like being sloppy or like not, would you say, setting the bar low? is there's definitely I think it's like an old karate proverb, but there's like definitely like a field of like range. Like there's where you start out, and then there's this no man's land, like minefield zone in the middle before you've actually conquered it. And you're almost worse off in the middle than you are if you had just stayed where you were. And so it may be a lot of that, like, I don't want to live in this minefield, demilitarized zone or whatever. Like, I don't want to be there because it's too stressful. So that idea of like, I don't need to play with a click to play music. I need to play with a click to play music well. Well, it's easier for me to, it's harder when I have to adjust all of these things and it makes doing what I already know how to do more difficult. It's like a good drummer who's never played with a click may hate playing with a click, even though he's a good drummer, because he's not, you know what I mean? So until you conquer that minefield in the middle, it's just easier. It's you produce better music when you don't have to implement that thing. And so, you know, being upfront with that, like having that, exposing that conversation is like, I get it. Like, this is rough. You know, this is, it is a total layer of subconscious autopilot playing that is removed. You can't play anymore because you have to think about every single thing that you do, because you're like constantly trying to stay, you know, in time with it. And it makes everything feel less natural. But there is hope, because the other side of that is conquering that and is growing, and it is, you know, becoming more seasoned, because you do get to a point where it becomes, you're now a better player because of it. So whether there's a click or not, you're a better player.
Yeah.
Just like people who don't want to learn music theory. They're like, oh, I don't want to learn it because I've never needed it. Well, that's fine. But like, if you learn it, you'll hate it. You'll hate it for a lot longer, and you'll still hate it a bit. But then you'll come out on the other side and be like, oh, now I get it. Like, now I know when to use it and when not to, like how to work with it and also be like more natural and expressive. But I understand, I'm always subconsciously, it's there, and I recognize its existence and its importance, instead of, because I don't know it, I don't use it and I stay away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and back to the sound company that you utilize, even Clare Brothers is known for installing and maybe orienting how things are used. None of these sound companies actually train, actually teach, actually work with the staff and help them understand not just how their particular system is put together, but how sound works, how to get a good mix in your ears, like all these other things that are like key to using their stuff well. And I'm not sure what, you know, I mean, except for that they aren't wired that way. That's not what their sweet spot is. You know, they're great designers. You know, they can do that part of the job really well, but it's not the training pieces. It's just not part of how they're put together, you know, which is why we work with them and they bring us in when they've put something in, like Claire does, not the other company. Claire has us come in sometimes and, hey, can you train them? Yeah, we can help them. So not to unnecessarily punish the company that you chose. That's every company. So almost every company, I should say. I'm sure there's some that do actual training, but anyway.
You can always just make a track of a popular song and shift the tempo a bunch, and then give it out to everybody and ask them if they like singing along to it in the car, and like very passive aggressively get to them. Like, was that fun? No? Good. Yep, good times. Something else that just jumped out at me that I don't know if it's worth talking about, but you said about counting in on the fast songs.
Yes.
What do you do to start a slow song? Not to make it too specific to you, but
that's the thing. It's like you don't have the drummer count it off. So it's like, okay, who's starting this? Is it the piano? Is it the guitar? You know, whatever. And so in practice, if we're struggling with the tempo, we'll have him bring it up and listen. But a lot of times they just start it and it's the tempo, whatever they start.
Good luck, yeah.
Just again, if you do it every time, it might get repetitive and unnecessary. But you know, sometimes it's nice to have drums bring, even if it's a light. I don't know how
Rush.
or talented your drummer, you know, feels or comfortable, but like even if you just count, like just keep like a little pulse on the ride cymbal, just a light, you know, like if everybody kind of lays down the opening chord or whatever it is, so that there's like some foundation, and then you just get that like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then like a little wash into it, and then everyone starts together, and then he's out, then he can leave out. Like you put like a kick for one, or just something to make it feel like we've begun, almost like pushing a ship off the dock, like where it starts and then it goes. And then let them wade through the water themselves. But at least you have like a unified starting point. I have people do that all the time because for that very reason. I'll be like, you know, oh, the piano player starts, but the acoustic should play too, or something else. I'm like, nobody knows when they're starting. Great, you're going to count it in on the ride. There we go. Problem solved. Moving on. It's not worth 45 minutes of rehearsal to me. Sorry. You know, so even with a click, that's still a way to do that because nobody knows how many clicks. You know, is it 2 bars of click? Is it 1 bar? When am I starting? You know what I mean? Something like that. Like it's like, oh, the drummer's just going to give me like a little thing, and we all know we're coming in together. So I think Dave, you said it last or 2 weeks ago that the drummer is a signaler.
Signal sections.
Signal sections. So I mean, I think that's huge. You know, to take advantage of. You've got this loud, centric, rhythmic sound that can bring everybody in together. Almost like a good conductor.
Yeah.
Only so many people can get the head nod. Some people can though. And God bless the world for those people who can, where you go and they know to come in. They're like, yeah, I know what he's going to do.
That's good. Cool. Has this been helpful?
Oh my gosh, yes. I like pages of notes.
Great.
Thank
Good.
you.
Well,
Yes. Good. I'm glad.
I mean,
Funny,
I think it would
thank
be
you, Dave and
helpful.
Jim. Dave and Jim are my brother's names.
Oh, look at that.
Sorry, Kevin, you're left out. I don't have one named Kevin.
That's normal.
You're the uncle. He's the uncle.
Yeah.
The cool uncle or the weird uncle. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is a great implementation of, you know, implementing a change. Wow. Implementation of implementing a change. That's great, Dave. Good job. It's a great example of the formula for change. You know, adding clicks, because it's a deal, man, and it's worth it. Hashtag too old.
It's not relevant anymore.
Oh yeah.
5 or 6 years old.
Did they kill Twitter yesterday? Did they like make them become, you know, responsible?
I have no idea. I don't deal with anything.
Not going to happen. Cool. Well,
I'm glad I tuned in today. Thank you.
yeah. Go play.
There you go. There's a better sign. Instead of hashtag whatever you said, just say go play.
Go play. Okay. All right. Cool. Well,
no, I used to tell the kids, the band that I worked with, I used to tell them all the time, if you want to do something, give me a good reason. So like something out of the, even if it's like, we want to repeat the bridge again, why? I'm not saying you can't do it. I just want you to have a good defendable reason to something like that. So whenever it comes to changing or implementing anything, it's that mentality of like, great, what are you doing? You're smiling, you're doing something bad.
Kevin sent me a meme, or as they call him here, meme.
I can't. I'm aging. You're aging me listening to this.
You got to share it, Dave.
All right, let's see here. All I got to do is share my screen. And here it is. This guy's an expert on music theory. See? No, nobody cares.
Wow.
That's great. What was the other one we had here? Can I show the other one too?
Yeah.
There we go.
Wait, yeah, while you're doing that, I have a good one.
Here's this one. That's fun. Good times. That's good. That's a good outro.
No, actually, I shout out to like, I don't know if he sometimes he watches these, so shout out. My drummer there, he is like the most like he's not a career music like he plays drums. He's been playing drums for a long time, but like when I was like, hey, we're gonna use click because they'd never used click or loop or anything, and we needed to use it for something they did for their vacation Bible school a few years ago, and I was like, we need loop for this. Like, I'm sorry, I'm making the call. And I was like, I know we've never done any of this before because I just started there like a few months before that. And he was like, yeah, I played with a click. I have never worked with someone who, when they said I played with a click, could actually deliver that. You know what I mean? Like, some people are like, yeah, I've done it before, and they have no idea how to play. And he was just like, he's better than me at it. I was like, oh my gosh. He's like, yeah, it's a click. This is how you play with it. I was like, wow, all right, cool. So hats off to him. That was one of the things I was afraid of, like, kind of like, not to echoing the issues you've had, but that idea of like, when I wanted to implement that, I was like, oh no, like, how is this going to go over? People are going to hate this. And he was just like, yeah, it's fine. Let's do it. And it was like, great. And I'm like, John, if I didn't have you, like, just rocks it every week. So it's fun. Yeah. It's fun
He's
to have.
Drummer.
He's an amazing drummer. He's great. He's got that like Rush, like, very, like that huge, yeah, like he's got these huge kits and fills, but it's always done well. Like, it's always tasteful. Again, same thing. When I met him and I saw his kit, I was like, oh no.
Oh boy.
Like, and then I heard him play and I was like, oh, never mind. This is fine.
Yep. Yeah. Didn't I lead? Did I ever lead there? I can't remember if I led there, if I just observed. I was like, oh, he is the band. Wow. He's fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. So,
and we haven't been there. I feel weird now. I'm just talking about, I love them. They work so hard, but we absorbed a bass player while I was on tour and away. I had to leave for work, and I was playing for something. And when I came back, I had a bass player who like had just joined the church and was like, yeah, and he's the same way. Like, been doing this all his life, like locks in. And I was like, this is great. Like,
wow.
So
enviable.
But that's why I said, like, my vocalists, they don't want to hear the click. They don't want to, I'm like, that's fine, because they're fine. Like, the two of them, just, everything's good. Unorthodox, maybe, because it would be nice to have everybody on it. But again, if it works for them, it works for them, and it's just the right, we haven't had any issues. And trust me, I would tell them to put it in if it was an issue. So.
No.
So are you one of the coaches too, Jim, with Adlib?
Yeah.
You are? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've been working as an Adlib coach for like almost 7 years now.
Wow.
We started in December of 2013.
Yeah. When he was a baby.
Yeah, if you think I'm young now.
That's right.
No.
Yeah, it's been a good time. Been a good run.
Well, I'll leave you with this from Kevin. Unrelated, and yet I've seen it before, and yet it's funny. So it's all good. All right, y'all. It is interesting to think about. There's 3 different, in my head, streams that music fits into, that people choose from. One is the theme, and so it kind of doesn't really matter. It has to fit the theme, or else. Right. And it's not so much that's the problem. It's that it doesn't matter that we don't know this song, that we'll never do the song again, that anything else. It fits the theme, so we got to do it.
Right.
And then there's the value of, like, it's got to be cool, it's got to be new, it's got to be interesting, it's got to be, and there's that whole like hamster wheel that you get on. And then there's like, my people have to know this song, and it's not as black and white as that, but it kind of is. Or at least it gets lived out that way.
Yeah.
Because you want to, you want to have a cohesive service, and you want to do new stuff, but like most of what you have to do, I think, has to be in that, like, my people know it and they sing it.
Mhm.
So
And I think a lot of times, like when all of the songs have to go with a theme, they don't even realize that it is. Like
right.
you do as the worship leader, because you thought it out, you planned it out, and you're like, oh, they're gonna, see that this song went with it and this song went with it, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just are singing songs and worshiping, and
Yeah.
really
Or-
probably not even thinking about that.
Or not, because they don't know the song.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.